Again, we have a phenomenal webinar today to cover a very important topic that is oftentimes overlooked, and that is sleep. And more importantly, how sleep is connected with nutrition. And to guide us through this conversation, we have an expert in the space, Dr. Audrey Wells. Dr. Audrey Wells is triple board certified in sleep, obesity, and pediatrics. She was the chief medical officer at Omni Sleep and has since founded Super Sleep MD, an online platform for education, support, and group coaching, specifically for people struggling with obstructive sleep apnea treatments. Dr. Wells also has an individual consultation program for high achievers who want to optimize their sleep to improve performance, vitality, and well-being. So as you can imagine, she is the perfect person to walk us through all the ins and outs of sleep and nutrition. Dr. Wells, welcome.
Thank you so much, Renee. It's great to see you and great to see everybody coming in, seeing a lot of Michigan represent too. That's where I did my medical school training, and I've since moved laterally across to Minnesota. So welcome everybody, and I'm so happy to be here.
Fantastic. Well, I want to just dive right in to explaining why we're having this conversation in the first place. So can you explain a little bit about why sleep is so important for our health in the first place?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit biased because this is my area of expertise, but the truth is sleep is a foundational, fundamental biological need. And it often gets kind of overlooked when you think of the holy trinity of health, diet, exercise, and sleep. But sleep actually supports all of our biological systems. It's the foundation on which our mental health is built. And so the way I look at it, if you're not sleeping well, then every other health metric that you're trying to improve or track is going to be undercut by poor quality sleep, too little sleep, or irregular sleep.
Absolutely. I mean, I know just personally, one bad night of sleep, it can derail me all week. So you can only imagine what that's doing internally to our systems and beyond. So what are some of the most common reasons that you've seen people experience poor sleep?
I think when you look at the population as a whole, there's an issue with prioritizing sleep. We have lots of things competing for our time and attention now. And so there's sometimes just this compression that takes place as we stay up later to get that me time in, to finish that last little bit. And then, we have this computer at the end of our hand that's with us all of the time. And when we're in bed, it's really seductive to like go in and get hypnotized by scrolling or, doing social media or Google searches or Netflix or whatever it might be. So our sleep time gets crunched. And I think there's still kind of a myth out there that I'll sleep when I'm dead, or somehow that short sleep is a badge of honor, of like durability or resilience, when the opposite is true. If you're not sleeping enough, you're really not maximizing your potential. So sleep has a PR problem, and part of my work is to try to overcome that and really highlight what sleep can do for you. And there's another piece here, which is that, when we sleep, it's like a blind spot in our life because by definition, we are unconscious during sleep. And that's a time when you might be having a sleep disorder that's unrecognized or undiagnosed. And so that's going to erode sleep quality and sleep duration as well. And in my line of work, I'm always kind of scanning for that, not just obstructive sleep apnea, but also problems like insomnia, which is really common, and restless leg syndrome, et cetera. So, between the sleep lifestyle and the possibility of underlying sleep problems, you can really start to get a complicated picture when it comes to sleep.
Interesting. And so, I'm sure there's a lot of people who do have sleep disorders or who just choose to sleep a little bit shorter, who recognize some of those problems with their sleep. But are there people out there that may not even know that they have a sleep disorder or disordered sleeping? And how would they go about figuring that out?
A lot of times you're looking for symptoms during the day, which are kind of like a red flag that you're not getting enough sleep or enough high quality sleep at night, I'll, I'll be forthcoming with using myself as an example. I have suffered from insomnia. I like to say that I'm not just book smart about insomnia, I'm also street smart because I've been through it.
Yeah.
And I am also capturing the beginning of my own obstructive sleep apnea. And I don't think that I'm the poster child for OSA. So if I went to a physician and said, I kind of lose my focus at the end of the day and I'm kind of tired, chances are they would not refer me for sleep testing. So, there's always kind of this tangential way of assessing sleep problems. But then there's like a more direct observation. Your bed partner tells you you're snoring, you're kicking, you're acting out your dreams, or whatever it might be. And so those are red flags that are more directly correlated with a sleep issue.
That's interesting. I mean, I normally wouldn't say like, oh, snoring is a red flag. I always, it seems relatively normal, or that you're kicking in your sleep. Those things seem
Yeah.
relatively normal, but to you, that's a red flag that there might be something more, or that is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think you might agree with me that sometimes snoring is associated with sleeping hard.
Yeah.
You're must be sleeping really hard or getting deep sleep, but snoring is abnormal. It's friction caused by, the tissues vibrating against each other as you're bringing air down into your lungs. And it can be kind of the tip of the iceberg for a more serious breathing problem, where you're having low oxygen levels and sleep disruption because your brain doesn't like low oxygen levels. It's a threat, so it has to wake up. So yeah, snoring is a red flag for sure. And sometimes people also report pauses in breathing during sleep, headaches when they wake up in the morning. In more extreme cases, even waking up gasping for breath or feeling like they're choking. Those are all signs of sleep apnea, but you can have no symptoms and still have sleep apnea. So it's always kind of a blind spot, as I say. You really need to just understand that because of the unconsciousness of sleep, that could be in operation without you knowing it.
Interesting. And so how does poor sleep, whether it come from just us shortening our sleep windows or possibly sleep apnea or other sleep disorders, how would this affect our long-term health?
It's a real problem. And one of the points that I like to use to sort of get people into that future focus is that the way you sleep, even now, has the ability to define how you spend the last 10 years of your life. I'm talking about dementia, yes or no. I'm talking about heart disease and vessel disease, yes or no. I'm talking about metabolic problems like diabetes, obesity, and I'm talking about your mental health. Sleep affects all of these things. And every night when you sleep, it's like a vote for health or non-health. And as you accumulate those votes over time, you end up defining how you spend your last 10 years.
Wow. That is, I mean, it's easy, I think, for people to just kind of pass by sleep as such a critical piece of our health and wellness. But when you think about it that way, and when you realize that every single night's sleep counts towards
Mhm.
that, towards your health, long
Yeah.
term, we really need to be mindful of that. So with that in mind, what would you recommend as the ideal number of hours, time sleeping, time to bed, time to wake up? What does that look like in your gold standard?
Yeah. First, I want to say that like length of sleep time is usually what we decide, did I sleep well? Did I not? So that's the quantity piece, and that's just one part of the puzzle. There's also sleep quality, there's sleep regularity, and then the fourth piece is, confirming that you don't have a sleep disorder, or if you do have a sleep disorder, getting that treated. So in terms of quantity of sleep, adults need at least 7 hours of sleep to um, flush out their brain, to enhance metabolic health, to make sure that their heart is functioning normally over time. Some people need more, and a good way to figure that out for yourself is to keep your sleep schedule really regular and don't assess how well you've slept right when you wake up. You want
Mhm.
to wait at least an hour or maybe even assess at 10 a.m. in the morning, assuming that you have an overnight sleep period. Um, because when you first wake up in the morning, your systems are just kind of booting up. So you don't want to assess your sleep right upon awakening. So you need at least 7 hours. Some people tell me, oh, but I need closer to 9 hours. And that's a tiny bit of a red flag for me. So some people compensate for sleep disorders by sleeping longer. So when someone says 9 hours, that gets my wheels turning, so to speak.
That's super interesting because I feel like there's probably a lot of people sleeping around that 9-hour mark. Do you know
Mm.
on average what are people sleeping? Are they generally significantly short? What's the average?
Yeah, in my world, I see people with sleep problems. So there tends to be a bimodal distribution. On one end, there's somebody who's like, I struggle to get 6 hours. And the scientific research is really clear. If you are consistently getting less than 6 hours of sleep or thereabouts per night, then it will do damage.
Mhm.
Increased risk for dementia, increased risk for cardiovascular disease, increased risk for obesity and diabetes. Um, and then on the other end of the spectrum are people who are like constantly tired and chasing sleep. Um, if they are logging 9 hours routinely, then I scan for other sleep issues. So, it's just one way to compensate for a fragmented sleep quality.
Interesting. We got a really good question by JJ. I hope I said that correctly. And they ask, what are your thoughts on naps or how to fix that 2 to 3 p.m. slump?
Yeah. So I'm team nap. I love naps. I take naps myself, and for me, it's not only kind of a reward, but it's a gravity break during the day, and it's also a way to kind of reboot my mental system. Um, but there's a right way to do naps, and there's a way that's going to sabotage your sleep at night. So if you're a person who likes naps or wants to take naps, it really helps to keep it less than 30 minutes, and that's total sleep time. If you sleep longer than that, you tend to cannibalize your sleep overnight. If you take a nap, a lot of times it's really helpful to lay down if you can, just to like fully get the benefit of relaxing your muscles, having your blood flow more regulated, so to speak. And it's a little bit of practice for sleep at night too. I've had some success with some people who have insomnia getting to sleep if they practice with a deliberately short nap during the day. Sometimes that's helpful to manage their mind and translate that to nighttime sleep.
That's so interesting because to be honest, I thought you were going to say something like, "Ooh, a 2 to 3 p.m. slump, that's a red flag. If you're tired, then maybe, there's something else going on." So your thoughts are more so, if you're feeling tired, get in that nap 30 minutes and let your body rest.
Yeah, the two to it's really like 1 to 3 p.m. depending on your chronotype. But everybody, all human beings have a little dip in their circadian rhythm in the early afternoon. It has nothing to do with what you had for lunch or how big your meal was. It's actually a very normal phenomenon. So if somebody tells me that they're sleepy during that time, I don't assign too much weight to that until I hear more about their context. If napping is not available to you, there's things you can do to perk up and wake up. Cold exposure is one. Getting out in, the brisk December air for a walk. Light exposure, whether it's the sun. Up here in Minnesota, the sun is quite impotent this time of year. So sometimes a light box helps. Doing some exercise, even if it's just doing a couple of flights of stairs up and down. All of these things signal wake to your body, and it can get you over that midday slump.
Fantastic. So now that we know what the gold standard is, what we want to achieve, what would you say are the best lifestyle changes that somebody can implement to improve that sleep quality?
Mm. So, one thing that I want to really highlight is the fact that when you have a regular sleep time, your brain, in the interest of efficiency, will bookmark that wake time and sleep time so that the pivot from wake to sleep is more efficient on both ends. So having a really regular sleep schedule makes a lot of sense for people who want to optimize their sleep quality. If I had to pick between starting with the bedtime or starting with the wake up time, start with the wake up time because you can control that better. And studies show that that's going to really anchor that pivot from sleep to wake and get you off on the right foot.
Mhm.
When you wake up, getting bright light into your eyes is a great way to signal your brain it's time to be awake.
Mhm.
Now, think about your brain box, your skull, right? It houses the brain. Your brain is in the dark, except for these windows here. So you're going to get the light into your windows to tell your brain it's time to be awake. Sunlight is best, especially that low solar angle with dawn. But if that's not available to you, a light box, at least 10,000 lux, is going to be a good signal. 15 minutes with it maybe 18 to 24 inches away. That tells your brain, hey, it's daytime now.
Awesome. And we kind of touched on this in terms of the amount of sleep that one should get in the day. But one thing we didn't really touch on was what time really you should be falling asleep. Like, is there an idea?
Mm,
We did kind of talk about this a little bit with Dr. Panda in our last episode. But if somebody wants to bookmark, as you mentioned, they want to bookmark their sleep time and their wake time, and they're steady, but they're steady shifted late and waking up
mhm.
late. How problematic do you think that is?
There's evidence that if you are going against your grain, that is an issue all by itself. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I am an extreme early bird, so I like to wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning. I finally stopped fighting, my early bedtime. So I go to bed about 9 at night, and then I wake up between 4 and 5. And I'm very happy with that schedule. So I would not be a good swing shift worker or overnight worker because that's not compatible with my own individual chronotype. Most people, 65% plus, have what's considered a typical or normal chronotype, which I call third birds. So there's early birds, night owls, and third birds in the middle. The third birds generally go to bed about 10 or 11 at night. They wake up at 6 or 7 in the morning. So that allows an 8 hour window for sleep opportunity. Within the 8 hours, they're sleeping, 7, 7.5. Um, the other example are, very commonly in the sleep world doing overnight sleep studies, night sleep techs, right? They work overnight. They're extreme night owls. And so their preference biologically is to wake up, late morning or early afternoon and then stay up during the night. So, there's sort of a genetic tendency to have that. But if you're somebody who has some flexibility in your preferences or tolerances, I will say, just as in way of optimization, that interestingly, the more sleep hours you log before midnight tends to confer a little bit of an advantage. And it's thought that that's when you are able to obtain more slow wave deep sleep, which is associated with the brain's flushing and getting rid of the day's metabolites and kind of doing a reset. So I think that if anyone has some flexibility, it would behoove them to shift their sleep schedule a bit earlier.
Right. And ideally, any hours before midnight, I mean, try and sneak those ones in. Those are
Yeah.
things. Awesome. Okay. So now specifically, what about nutrition? How can we adjust, change, improve our nutrition to maximize sleep?
You know, I counsel about this all the time, not just in the context of my obesity medicine expertise, but also because hungry and tired kind of run together, right? So when you think about these two feelings, it's about energy management. We
Mhm.
get energy from food, we get energy from sleep. And so when we talk about what to eat, how much to eat, and when, there's an analogous, situation with how much to sleep, when to sleep, and how. So, so food and wakefulness should be paired. That is how we are biologically optimized.
Mhm.
Um, I always say, it's better to stop eating 3 hours before bedtime, not just so that you can like digest and reduce the chances that acid reflux will cause you to wake up in the middle of the night, but also because if you are continuing to digest as it's bedtime, that competes with some hormonal changes that necessarily take place with sleep. Melatonin, for example. So you can blunt your melatonin spike if you are overlapping your food intake too much. I really like intermittent fasting because it sort of puts some guardrails on your eating times and separates that nicely from your sleeping times. So keeping those two periods distinct has real advantages metabolically.
Fantastic. I'm going to jump to a question here by Bonnie, who asks, what are your recommendations for timing, which we kind of addressed right here? We would say three for dinner specifically. She asks three
Yeah.
hours before you go to bed, but she also asks about meal size. What are
Mm.
your thoughts around meal size for dinner to optimize sleep or throughout the day even?
Yeah, this is out of all of the research on, best diet or optimal weight loss. This is one thing that's actually borne out is pretty clear. If you can move the bulk of your calories earlier in the day,
Mhm.
that helps you metabolically. It helps with food cravings. It helps with satiety. And, I think that socially there may be some friction there because, people like to go out to eat in the evening. And that's, a great time for family. But in general, if you can consume more calories earlier, that tends to have some benefits.
Fantastic. Okay, so you mentioned intermittent fasting.
Mm.
And of course, we would be remiss not to bring up fasting here at Al Nutra. So, what does the research say about the long-term impact of fasting on sleep?
Long term, it's beneficial for
Mhm.
sleep. And I think that it's really clear again that keeping these two activities separate and distinct is advantageous for your brain, for your metabolism, for your immune system, for your gut microbiome. All of the systems necessary for these two separate activities work better when they are separated in time. So I'm a huge fan of intermittent fasting. I'm a huge fan of the fasting mimicking diet. And I think that it makes sense for anyone who wants to improve their health to address their diet and address their sleep simultaneously.
Why do you think, I mean, we get so many reports of people, especially with all the Aura rings and all of these, sleep assessment tools. People kind of have a sense of how their sleep is improving after they do a fast, and especially with the fasting mimicking diet, a lot of people are seeing improvements in their sleep quality after they've completed their 5-day fast.
Yeah.
Where do you think most of that is coming from, just based off of your experience?
Yeah, I think that when you regulate more, when you kind of engage in practices that involve autophagy, that involve reducing inflammation, that get your systems more on a um, timer to create like this symphony of health, then there's a lot of benefit that kind of develops from that. And anyone who makes a commitment to that has like a halo effect of good things that happen. So it's important when you embark on a journey like this, a health journey, if you're really serious about it, if it's one of your values, to really play the long game, okay? Because, you know, we'll talk about this, but one of the short-term effects of fasting, even with the fasting mimicking diet, is that sleep can get rocky for a
Yeah.
time. And, I've had people ask me like, oh God, I can't deal with this forever. But I'm here to tell you that, you know, there's perspective. This will pass. But, I kind of think of it as like you're shuffling things around so that they can fall in a more natural, more optimal place.
Absolutely. So what, you mentioned it. Some
Yeah.
people do a fast and they experience worse sleep during the fasting period. What is going on? Of course, there's some aspects of hunger that are tapping into that, but it sounds like there's more to it. What's going on in our body that's affecting sleep during a fast?
Yeah, I'm going to take it back to this idea about hunger and tired. And, anybody who's kind of turned inward and evaluated these feelings knows that they are complex feelings. So I'm going to throw some things out there for people to consider, but it would be impossible for me to say, oh, you have this and this. Like, that's not what I'm here for. But yes, you mentioned it. If you feel hungry, then that's not necessarily compatible with sleeping because biologically we are programmed to satisfy hunger. If it's physiologic hunger, there's a difference between hedonic hunger. So we are programmed to satisfy that. In fact, orexin is a
Mhm.
hormone that is increased in fasting or fasting mimicking diets. And that is paired with not only wakefulness, but wake stabilization. Okay. Um, so that's one aspect. There's some temperature shifts that occur, and temperature and sleep go together. So when you have when your temperature is falling, that's a signal for sleep. When it's increasing, that's a signal for wake. And if you have a lot of shifts during a fast, then your body or your brain might be off its equilibrium, so to speak. So it may be a little bit dicey with sleep and wake. Norepinephrine is secreted. That can be a competitor with sleep. I mentioned physiologic hunger and hedonic hunger. So many people have a significant hedonic hunger. They are programmed, so to speak, to seek out reward. That's the hedonic component. And so if you're not getting that from food, it can make you feel uneasy, and that's competitive with sleep. So there's a number of reasons why you may sleep worse in the short term. However, I know that when you're in a fasting mimicking diet like Prolon or L-Nutra, there seems to be this mental clarity and energy
Mhm.
that is there even though you aren't sleeping as well. So I
Yeah.
like to reassure people. And once again, I want to say, even if you had a poor night's sleep, don't judge and get your brain in a suffering mode when you first wake up. Give it an hour, give it 2 hours, and then assess how you feel.
Right. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because during fasting, when, especially when we have some of these counter regulatory hormones in place, even though our sleep might be shortened or we might have a difficult time falling asleep, there's all these counter-regulatory hormones that are activating so that we can, I mean, evolutionary speaking, go hunt down food.
Yeah.
So even though you've had that shortened window of sleep during those 5 days, you might actually not feel so exhausted as you would if you weren't fasting because of all of the counter-regulatory hormones. Is that about right?
Yeah, it is. And I also want to say something about fitness trackers and sleep trackers because, I'm into it. I try them. I love tech. So I try them all. Compare. I've been studying my own sleep for years. Um, and I love them. And that the horse is out of the barn, but don't hang all of your belief system on what your tracker is telling you, especially for sleep stages and sleep fragmentation. It's still only about 70% accurate. I love it that it elevates sleep into your awareness. I love it that it puts it on the radar as a health metric, but just still check in with yourself to see how you feel and let that define and guide how you practice in your life in terms of, do I need more coffee? Do I need to do a couple of flights of stairs or whatever? Just don't hang your hat on the sleep trackers quite yet.
Yeah, I think that's so important to note, especially because they are everywhere and it is really easy to just stop trusting yourself and start
Yes.
trusting something that you think has been very scientifically validated. And all of a sudden you're like, oh man,
Yeah.
I'm tired. Maybe I should go with that.
It has been scientifically validated for young adult men with no sleep disorders. Typically, that's typically, and I think the data is improving all the time. And as it does, I continue to modify what I say. But the sleep trackers, they have a yin and a yang.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the hunger piece before bed impacting in sleep. And there's a couple things that I just wanted to note in terms of specifically our recommendations around how to support that with fasting mimicking diets. If you do find that you're having a difficult time falling asleep when you're on an FMD, our recommendations, and I would love to hear your feedback on these recommendations, Dr. Wells, is one, save a piece of your L bar, which is a little bit more of a hearty, fat forward, nutty bar. Save a piece of that closer to bed so that you don't feel as hungry, which can be really helpful. It's also a fasting mimicking product, and so it doesn't spike blood sugar, which is great before bed as well. Another thing that we recommend is that people maybe take like an Epsom salt bath to just like de-stress, calm down before they go to bed. But those two things have been constantly really helpful in a lot of the case studies that we've seen where people are having a difficult time falling asleep due to the FMD. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable thing. And everybody's different. So as you commit to a 5-day protocol, I think it makes a lot of sense to do some pre-work, if you will. And, you know, you've heard of sleep hygiene, right? Like this term drives me bonkers because it's almost as meaningless as eat your vegetables. It's just sleep hygiene is worn out. So I like to talk about it in a little different way, which I think is relevant here.
Mhm.
When you're hungry, your brain is a little bit on fire, right? It's in a vigilance state, which
Mhm.
is not compatible with sleep.
Yeah.
So what these sleep hygiene practices do is they tell your brain, this is the routine, this is safety, this is consistency, this is okay. And so if you lock that in prior to your fasting mimicking diet, then you lean into that safety signal even as you're hungry and you learn it's okay to be hungry because
Mhm.
hungry goes in waves, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. And we always tell people like you don't technically have to prep, but I mean realistically, life is always preparing for a healthier version of yourself. So anytime you can take
Totally.
step in the right direction, do that. Dive
Yeah,
in.
I mean, secretly, my whole plug is for people to do this and then keep doing it, right?
Yeah,
Because the
exactly.
well-slept version of you is the best version of you, and that's what you want every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, well, that covers all of the questions that I had prepared and made sure that I wanted to cover with you. And we have a ton of questions coming in into the Q&A. For anybody who I did see a couple of questions jump into the chat, make sure your questions are in the Q&A and we will touch on them there. So I'm going to start with a question by John, and actually, funny enough, the same question by an anonymous attendee shortly after, asking about whether the 7 hours of sleep that you recommend can be broken up if you wake up in the middle of the night. Do they have to be contiguous?
They don't. And this is one way where I like to think outside the box because, you know, waking up in the middle of the night is not abnormal. It's not abnormal. But if you feel like it is, then you add a layer of suffering to
Right.
your experience. Um, Waking up in the middle of the night, and especially as you enter your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, and beyond, this becomes more of the norm. I won't get into what the science says about, historical findings and whatever, but yes, it can be broken up, preferably into 2 or 3 sleep chunks. Many people tolerate that very well, and it's part of my mission to normalize that so that you don't sort of constantly labor under this idea that you should be sleeping in an 8-hour block. That happens when we're in our 20s, and then we kiss it goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty incredible how quickly our bodies can change. And I mean, we kind of have to roll with it and do what we can to support. And ideally have our physicians and our network of practitioners supporting us like you do here. So thank you. Really interesting question from an anonymous attendee asking about using a CPAP machine. Is it worth the loss of the ability to exhale deeply and completely for 8 hours when your body is trying to repair itself during sleep?
Mm. Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I'll tell you that I've had my fingers on the pulse of like any sleep apnea alternative besides CPAP because I think it's just like dinosaur technology. I can't believe we're still having CPAP. Yeah, so normally exhalation is passive, right? You breathe out, you exhale carbon dioxide. And with CPAP, it's not a closed system. So you exhale out of the exhalation ports, which are it's the intentional leak of your CPAP mask. But I think what the person asking the question is wondering about is when you exhale against the incoming pressure. And that's a big reason why a lot of people have trouble with CPAP or find it uncomfortable. I want to give you a little preview that the world is changing in CPAP. There's a really interesting therapy coming out called KPAP, Kairos PAP, which I think will do a lot to not only increase the comfort of PAP therapy, but also make it more physiological breathing. And because of the diffusion quotient for carbon dioxide, which is 70 times greater than that of oxygen, there is generally no issue with exhaling carbon dioxide other than that pressure that can be a little bit of a discomfort.
Mhm.
But yeah, you're not going to retain any more carbon dioxide as long as your pressure setting is accurate.
Okay, fantastic. Lynette asks a question. We did touch on the fact that waking up in the middle of the night is not a problem, but she asks, what do you suggest to manage frequent awakenings? Are your thoughts that don't worry about it, it's okay? Or do you have suggestions on how to resolve this?
Let me clarify about nighttime awakenings because, again, if I had a magic wand, this would be the thing I would fix.
Mhm.
Um, so it's not that frequent nighttime awakenings are normal. That is not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is if you wake up in the middle of the night, and roll over and go back to sleep. That's entirely normal. In fact, fun fact, it takes about 3 to 5 minutes of being awake to actually remember that the following day. So a lot of the awakenings we have, we just don't remember.
Yeah.
But if you're waking up frequently, there's something going on. What is it? I don't know. So you start looking for symptoms. Is there someone who can report on how you're moving or breathing during sleep? Are you having daytime headaches or sleepiness? Do you have medical conditions that could be aggravated with an underlying sleep problem and therefore would escalate the need for testing? All of these things maybe deserve the next step, which is investigation.
Okay, fantastic. And at what point do you think you should go see a physician for sleep? At what point do you go, and assuming you have to kind of go through the ranks, going to see your practitioner, and then they'll refer you to a sleep physician. When do you go that far?
That doesn't always have to happen anymore. That used to be true. But nowadays, you oftentimes insurance plans will allow you to just go see a sleep specialist that's within their network. You can certainly see somebody out of network, but you'll end up paying for it for sure. Um, and even online, you can get sleep tests. But the question is, what are you going to do after that sleep test? And that's where I think you really need medical expertise.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, in the whole United States, there's only 7,500 sleep medicine physicians. So there's way more people needing help than there are physicians. So I would say it's better to get things checked earlier rather than later. Have a lower threshold for sure if you have any brain problems, heart problems, lung problems, or metabolic problems. And even subspecialists are getting really clued in to the sleep issue. For example, I routinely get consulted and referrals from cardiologists who have people having atrial fibrillation, heart attacks, untreatable hypertension, all of those things, really would point to a sleep issue as potentially working under the behind the scenes, as it were.
It's wild how interconnected our body is to
Yeah.
everything that we do. So, sleep and otherwise. Pia asks, thoughts on alcohol, sugar, desserts, and their effect on sleep?
Yeah, alcohol is interesting. And I get a lot of questions about alcohol this time of year because people are in a celebratory mood. And I'm not here to yuck your yum, but unfortunately, alcohol has many, many negative effects on sleep. There's only one thing that it does well, which is sedate you to get you to sleep a little bit faster. But it that's where the party ends. So it will fragment sleep in the second half of the night. So you'll lose out on a lot of REM sleep or dream sleep. That's important for emotional regulation. It dehydrates you, it increases your heart rate. It paralyzes a muscle in your tongue, making it more likely that you'll snore and have airway blockages during sleep. You go through a withdrawal in the middle of the night. So it's no good. If you're going to imbibe, better to do it earlier and with fewer drinks. Um, yeah, and increased heart rate is not compatible with sleep. And I know this from the many people I've worked with who have anxiety or, take medications that elevate their heart rate. That is directly competitive with sleep. And so some of the work that I do is to help people deliberately reduce their heart rate to invite sleep.
Fantastic. Okay, Nikki asks, what are your thoughts on the amount of deep and REM sleep needed daily?
Depends on age. So with every passing decade, you get less slow wave deep sleep. Slow wave deep sleep is mainly concentrated at the beginning of the night. And, when you're younger, especially, when you're elementary school age, you're doing a lot of growth hormone secretion with slow wave deep sleep. That's when the brain flushing occurs. But as you age, that sleep stage tends to be more and more reduced. And interestingly, it seems like we can live without it, which is not true for REM sleep.
Mm.
With REM sleep, there's actually a condition called familial fatal insomnia, and it's thought to be related to research findings on rodents that are having selective REM sleep deprivation. So those rodents who are not allowed to have REM sleep stop grooming themselves, they stop eating, and within a few weeks they die. So REM sleep is critical. We don't understand exactly why, but there's a lot of important functions um, that are tied to REM sleep. I mentioned emotional regulation, memory, and processing are others. With REM sleep, normal is going to be about 20 to 25% of your total sleep time, assuming you're in the 7 to 8 hour range.
Okay, 20 to 25% in critical sleep. I'm curious, REM stands for rapid eye movement. So your eyes are moving around. What the heck is going on that's the reaction that our body has during this type of sleep?
The rapid eye movements.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So dreams are thought to be like the brain's virtual reality system on which it processes our experiences from the day.
Mm.
And you get that's where the emotional regulation comes from. So when somebody tells you, you've got a big decision or you've got something weighing on your mind and someone says sleep on it. That's what happens. We sleep on it and our REM kind of takes the edge off all of the emotion so that when we wake up the next day, we have more clarity that's coming from our uh, executive brain, the part that makes decisions and really thinks logically. Um, Rapid eye movement sleep may or may not. There's controversial evidence. I do a lot of work with trauma and people who have trauma histories. So have you heard of EMDR?
No.
Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So it's a therapy modality by which you use these lateral eye movements as you're processing trauma. And
Mm.
so you may, in some sense, be recreating what REM sleep does to get to emotional regulation and kind of, again, diffuse that traumatic experience. It's really fascinating. And, for me, REM sleep is the chef's kiss of sleep. I love it.
Well, and I can hear it in the way that you talk about it, and you're getting me. I mean, it sounds so cool. Just everything that's going on behind closed eyes.
Yeah,
It's
that's a good one. Behind closed eyes.
you can keep it. Okay, so Danielle asks, how do you determine your chronotype?
Yeah, so you want to think about your preferences, right? Like, do you prefer to go to bed later and get up later? Do you prefer to have the opposite sort of schedule? Sometimes your occupation or your family demands uh, prevent this in a sense. But if you think about when you go on vacation, let's say, like if you were to just have total control over your schedule, what would your preference be so that you could feel well? You go to bed when you want to, you wake up when you want to, and you sleep with a very high quality and with regularity. That's going to give you a good idea about your sleep preference. There's another way to kind of come at it more academically, I suppose. It's called the morningness, eveningness questionnaire. And you can Google that. There's copies that you can fill out and then score yourself to find out if you're a third bird or a night owl or a morning lark.
That sounds so interesting because I can also imagine that, with all of our phones and, devices, it's probably pretty hard to let our body truly guide us if
Mhm.
unless we really just shut it all off for like a couple of days and really let our body tell us what's going on.
Yep, you hit the nail on the head for sure.
So Rick asks, and also an anonymous attendee asked, what do you think about mouth taping?
Yeah, I like mouth taping. I talk about it all the time because I am a huge fan of nasal breathing. Your nose was meant to breathe, and
Mhm.
it helps your immune system, it helps your circulatory system, and mouth taping is a great way to enhance nasal breathing. Going back to REM sleep a little bit, one of the cardinal features of normal REM sleep is muscle atonia. So you lose muscle tone, so you don't act out your dreams, presumably. And as a result, you can have your mouth sort of fall open during sleep, especially if you're laying on your back. And that mouth breathing can interfere with sleep quality. That's even in the absence of sleep apnea or anything else going on. Mouth breathing makes for poor sleep quality, whereas nasal breathing means better sleep quality.
So cool. So cool. And also the person who figured that out. Taping your
Yeah. And don't put duct tape on your lips, people. Don't put duct tape or electrical tape or masking tape. You need medical tape for human skin. That's what you need if you're going to mouth tape.
Absolutely. Okay. Danielle asks, what can one do to stay asleep longer when falling asleep is not an issue, but staying asleep for 7 or more hours is?
Yeah. So I talk to people a lot about their diet. You want to look for a diet with minimally processed foods. You want to, have meals that are defined and within an eating window. That's a great way to sleep longer. Exercise is another biggie. If you are somebody that wants to sleep deeper, stay asleep longer, and feel more robust in terms of being awake and energetic, get your exercise in, cardio, lifting, whatever it is. That physical activity means your sleep quality is going to improve.
Okay, fantastic. I feel like that's pretty easy to sneak in at some point in the day. Uh,
Easier said than done, I feel like.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe
But
I
I
should
mean,
speak for
even
myself.
5 minutes, I mean, does that count? Or does it have to be like a full 30, 45 minute?
Everything counts. But if you're really looking to improve your sleep quality, you want to shoot for at least 20 minutes of exercise. And then you can kind of customize it. But realize, like, as human beings, we're so complex, you're not necessarily going to see a one-to-one relationship. So whenever you try something like this, if your goal is to improve sleep, you got to give it 2 weeks,
Mm,
really. You got to
mm,
give it 2 weeks of consistent behavior change before you start to see it flush out in your sleep.
yeah, absolutely. And also it'll help with setting that, you know,
The
routine
routine.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Yaron asks, I know we talked a little bit about not relying too much on our devices to track sleep, but if you were to pick one, which one would you pick?
For a sleep tracker.
Yeah.
Oh, good one. You know, right now I like the Aura ring. They've got a lot of data. They've made some improvements. A couple of years ago, they had a major change to their algorithm, which I really liked. There's some new players coming up on the scene, though, and I think that they're going to give Aura a run for their money. I have no relationship with Aura or any tracking device for that matter, and I'm not a watch wearer, so like the Samsung and the Apple Watch, that's not even on my radar. And I do want to say that, their ability to reassure you about the absence of sleep apnea. Don't No, no, no. They're only good when they say, "Oh, you should go get checked." But if they're saying like, "No,
False negative.
oxygen disturbances detected," no, they're not sensitive enough for that yet. Um,
Right.
but yeah, I like the Aura. This is the Aura ring here, in case anybody's interested. I like it because it's a ring. It's very non-invasive. It's easy to charge up. I like their digital platform. Fitbit consistently scores high on accuracy.
Mm.
On the other end of the spectrum, Garmin consistently scores low. And then everybody else is kind of in between. But it's a really personal choice based on where you like to wear your device and how much you want to spend.
Absolutely. Um, actually, another note on another very trending sleep tool is the 8 mattress that it
Hmm.
is, all the rage. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean it's a spendy product for sure. I think that it's a very nice product and it's for, kind of leveling up your sleep comfort. Um, there's a lot of things you can do without spending that much money. For example, I talk to people a lot about, heating pads for feet, cooling pads for face, ways to manipulate your temperature with bath at nighttime. I like to enhance, senses like smell, taste, etc. So there are other things you can do. Would I turn down an 8 sleep topper? No, I would not. Because I'm a woman of a certain age, and a certain age comes with hot flashes. And I feel like, that's something that I could manage better. Um, so yeah, I like it, but
But
it's
there are other ways. There
there are
are
other ways. Yeah.
awesome. And that's really what we want to know. So Gary asks, ironically, I eat at night because it helps me to go to sleep,
Hmm.
which is one of the reasons he has difficulty with weight management. So is that something that he's just trained his mind to accept, or what are your suggestions for Gary?
Yeah, Gary, I'd really challenge that belief. And here's why. Uh, Everybody who sleeps overnight has a dip in their dopamine levels at night. This is just one of the hormone or one of the neurotransmitters that has a circadian overlay. And so you're kind of like, this is one reason why you're driven to get the munchies at night. And you're not going to the refrigerator for like cucumber slices, right? You're going for the ice cream and you're going for the buttered popcorn. And it's because you kind of lose that inhibition. Your frontal lobes are worn out at the end of the day. They can only work for about 16 hours and they're just like, I'm out of here. It's time for bed. But your emotional, your hedonic hunger will start to come up and it's unopposed now. Your frontal lobes are offline. So, my advice to you, Gary, is to work on the story that you're telling yourself, because I'll bet you could shift your calories to the beginning of the day. I bet you could increase your protein. I bet you could increase your fiber and your fat, your healthy fats, and feel very well about going to sleep at night.
Absolutely. And I'll also throw in a note about the fast bar that we always recommend as if you find yourself incredibly hungry late at night, ideally a little, you still want to give yourself that 3-hour window, but it can be a great tool because it doesn't spike your blood sugar. It is healthy fats, nut-based bar. It can be something that you can go to that will allow you to stay in that fasted state, but still give you a little bit of that satiety. So the fast bar might be something you want to look into to help you start shifting a little bit earlier as you work your way towards that gold standard.
That one's tasty too. I like that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. All of the flavors are good, but my favorite's chocolate chip. So all right. Debbie asks, what are the thoughts on limited use of sleeping pills during a bad spell?
Yeah, every time I write a prescription for a sleep aid, I have an exit plan with my patient because it's clear that, these are sedative medications that do not have a pass for long-term side effects. In other words, you will have side effects in the long term, and sometimes in the short term too. But life happens, doesn't it? And we deal with problems, and sometimes we need something to get us through. And when you're dealing with stress or grief or just overwhelm,
Mhm.
you need sleep to kind of boost you up. So, you know, start low, go slow,
Mhm.
and make sure that you're doing the healthy lifestyle practices that are supporting your sleep and supporting your wake at the same time.
Yeah. So we're actually over the hour mark. I have still a ton of questions, but we're only going to take maybe, do you have time for one or two more?
Yeah, yeah, I can do one or two.
Okay, perfect. Sarah asks, I love taking magnesium gummies at night, and they seem to really improve my sleep. Can I become addicted because it worries me that I don't sleep well when I don't take them?
No, no worries there. And I want to say that where sleep is concerned, there's a huge placebo effect with anything.
Mhm.
And, you know, this is demonstrated in many scientific papers. So my principle is always first do no harm. You're taking probably 400 milligrams of magnesium in each gummy. No issue with that at all. It's going to get excreted in your urine.
Hey, fantastic. Um, And I want a good question for our very last one.
So
So
many good questions.
there's so many. Okay. The last one is going to be from Lorena, who asks about CBD and CBD oils to help you sleep.
Yes.
Ah, there
Yes.
you go. I did pick a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, this is a great question. And I actually went through the Anschutz, Colorado School of Medicine's CBD and cannabis training program because as CBD, cannabis, THC, CBN, all of it, as that gets more legalized, it's come up on my radar, and I've been following the data in Colorado for a number of years, seeing how recreational cannabis and CBD goes up, and Ambien and other sleeping pills go down. So okay, but slow your roll, people, because you can't take the CBD every night and expect it to work long term. Don't do that. You will sabotage yourself because you'll become dependent on it and it will stop working for you. So again, start slow and go just go as low as you can with CBN, CBD to get the sleep effect that you want.
Mhm.
THC is not your friend. You get a little smidge in there to potentiate the CBD, but most people do well at 2.5 milligrams CBD, maybe 5 milligrams CBD, but every other night, or taking a 2-day drugs off free per week. So that should help in making it work for you long term.
That's great.
Slow your roll, people.
That's great. And we had another question, which unfortunately I did have to skip, but asking just about, having tried a bunch of things, but they only work for 2 weeks. And maybe this kind of plays in that feedback plays into that too, of just giving yourself some days off so that you don't let your body get so fully accustomed to these remedies.
Yeah, and I also want to say there's no magic beans where sleep is concerned. I mean, do I wish that there was just like that one magic pill? Yes, I do, of course. But you still need the light management, your exercise, your diet on track, your social and mental well-being in tune. All of that helps support your sleep. So it's not just one thing. So you got to still do all of the hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Dr. Wells, you have given us so much incredible information. I am sure, as we still have so many questions in the pipeline, where can people get more information, connect with you to learn more?
Yeah, a couple of places. So my website, supersleepmd.com, is for people with sleep apnea and insomnia. I have 4 online courses there. And there's a little work with me button. And if you want a one-on-one consultation, I do that. I also have a program where I do one-on-one coaching for high achievers. Typically, I do a lot of physician coaching. That's at awellsmd.com. Just teaching people how to optimize sleep so they can, show up to their lives better every single day. And I'd love to meet people in your audience. Certainly you can tell this is my passion. I love nerding out about sleep, and I love helping bring people along so that they can enjoy the natural pleasure of sleep too.
Absolutely. I mean, it is so visible in the way that you speak about this, and it's such a pleasure to get to listen and to ask you all these questions. I know the audience is already in the chat saying thank you and giving, all of the gratefulness for you being here and sharing your wisdom with us today. And I can only anticipate that they'll be bugging you very soon as well. So thank you for being here today. And I wish everybody a really incredible holiday season. Thank you for joining us this December. We are going to be taking a break in January from our webinar series because we are doing our January fasting challenge, where we are joined by some very special guests. So please keep your eyes peeled. I already know a few, but I'm not allowed to tell. So keep your eyes peeled. You'll hear about it through our email. But that fasting challenge in January, we're going to have 4 incredible special guests that are going to be supporting those fasting challenges in January. And then we're back in February. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for being an incredible audience. And thank you so much, Dr. Wells, for your insight.
My pleasure. Good to see everybody. Take care.
Bye, guys.